Henry, how you doing, my friend? We got another show.
Yes, we do. And we have something that I think is near and dear to your heart,
Absolutely.
as you know a thing or two about auto insurance and dealing with insurance companies. And we have a guest today who can really enlighten us. Michael DeLong is with the Consumer Federation of America. He's the Research and Advocacy Associate for Consumer Federation of, I almost put him in the wrong confederacy, Consumer Federation of America's Campaign for Fair Auto Insurance. He conducts research on auto insurance and advocates for better, fairer, and more affordable practices that will protect consumers. He's focused on combating discrimination in the insurance market. And he's worked also as a healthcare and antitrust advocate. He's very familiar with the legislative process, and he's joining us today.
Michael DeLong, thanks for being here. I'm really excited to speak with you because here in Florida, for example, I have a license. I'm an attorney here in Florida and also in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, general in Minnesota. And I find it interesting to see the different states and how they operate with insurance. But Florida, we're sort of like a Wild West state. And we're trying to understand, why is it we're paying ridiculous amounts for insurance and getting hardly any coverage? So I'm very grateful that you're with us. Michael, tell us a little bit about your background and how did you get into this research and helping consumers about insurance and so forth?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Again, Michael DeLong with Consumer Federation of America. I was interested in nonprofit work. I worked for nonprofits after I graduated from college, but I first actually got into consumer work and insurance when I worked for an antitrust lawyer named David Balto. And for a long time, he was beating the drum, saying that antitrust work was important, that large corporations getting really concentrated was bad for consumers, bad for prices, bad for quality, bad for everybody. And for a long time, he was not like a lone voice in the wilderness, but he was sort of out of fashion. Although in recent years, people have been realizing how important stopping big corporations from getting too powerful and concentrated is. So I worked for him. We opposed mergers of big corporations like health insurance mergers. And that's how I first heard about Consumer Federation of America, because I was mobilizing consumer opposition to various big merger deals. And Consumer Federation of America was one of the groups that I recruited often to like try and sign on to letters or organize rallies or other things like that. And they did a lot of great work. And so I eventually went to work for them.
How did this attorney make money being an antitrust attorney? I'm just curious how was it just a passion, just like a public defender represents indigents? Or, how did he earn and why was he so passionate about this antitrust work? I'm just curious about that.
A combination of many different things. Part of it was passion. Part of it was he was able to find some clients to fund this work. Like sometimes he would find like businesses that would be opposed to like another big merger because it was going to harm them. And so he did that. He also really cared a lot about this. He served in the federal government many years ago under the Federal Trade Commission and realized what a big problem like concentration in large corporations were then.
So this move into to be an expert, if you will, if I could call you that, on auto insurance or insurance. Is it just auto insurance, insurance in general? Is it just auto insurance, your specialty?
Auto insurance is what I started out with, but now I've branched out to include homeowners insurance and flood insurance as well. It's a big topic. One of the main things that we learned is that insurance is complicated. I think sometimes the insurance companies want to make it more complicated than it really is, which is already like plenty complicated, to try and intimidate consumers and make it so they don't ask questions.
Yeah, here in Florida, we not only have outrageous auto insurance rates and very little coverage, but our homeowners are skyrocketing. We've never seen these kind of hikes. I guess the hurricane season's coming. We insure, one of the biggest questions my friend was talking to me about, I said, how come if I live on a beach and I have this mega mansion, I have to contribute basically to covering that multimillionaire, his home, when I live in a non-flood zone and they're charging me a lot more so that they can cover those guys? Is that some of the thing that goes on in insurance, or can you speak to that a little bit? I know we got to get onto auto, but I was just curious about that aspect of it.
There are a lot of reasons for Florida's insurance mess, insurance crisis. Part of it is due to like a rising cost of parts and labor. Part of it is like due to building materials and such, but a lot of it is due to like climate change. Climate change is causing it's causing a lot more extreme weather events. It's making hurricanes stronger and more frequent. It's making rainstorms stronger and more frequent. Like you get a lot of rain in a few hours, which causes floods.
Happening right now.
Yeah, you have some other factors like for example, I know you said Ron DeSantis says that it's all due to lawyers and frivolous lawsuits.
Right.
That may contribute a little bit, but we don't think it's the primary factor. And we can talk more about this after auto insurance. But one of the things that Consumer Federation of America is advocating for is measures to try and reduce risk. Like you can save a lot of money and reduce your insurance risk by spending money to really harden your home, like say upgrade your roof against wind damage, raise your home on stilts if like you're in a very flood prone area. The problem is that money, while you can save money, it costs money in the first place to implement those measures. So we're advocating for consumers to do that, but we're also urging state governments to establish grant programs and expand grant programs if they already are doing that to help consumers undertake these measures. And also we're saying that insurance companies, if consumers do these measures, the insurance companies should be required to pass on the savings to consumers instead of keeping it for themselves.
Michael, before we dive too much into the auto insurance, just tell us a little bit more about the Consumer Federation of America so we know what their scope is and what other work they're doing.
Yeah, the Consumer Federation of America, we're an association of consumer organizations. We got founded all the way back in 1968, and we work to advance consumer interests through research, through advocacy, like at the state and federal level, and through like education. And we do work on a lot of different issues. I work mostly on making insurance more affordable and accessible, but other staffers work on things like food safety, product safety, preventing financial exploitation, trying to make housing more affordable and accessible as well, energy efficiency. So there's a lot of different consumer issues, and I help out occasionally with what we're doing. So we work on a whole lot of different areas, but I focus mostly on insurance.
Michael, my question, let's stay with this homeowners for a minute. Is it government's role to help fix the problem, the cost of the insurance rates in Florida for homeowners? You know, what the legislature did in March of last year is that attorneys, let's say there was a hurricane and you had a dispute with the insurance company, say you thought it was $100,000 to fix whatever, and they're giving you 50. So you hired a firm, they litigate, they won the 100, and then they get the attorney fees on top of that. And what the governor's done here is just to say, well, you get the 100 if you win, but you're going to have to pay your lawyers out of that. So you're back to close to 50 of what you originally, so there's no incentive to go after the insurance company. I mean, is that going to fix the problem? Is that the reason we have these high rates of insurance? Because they haven't gone down since March back when they passed these laws. Who's responsible for this? Who should be leading the fight, and what should they be doing? That's a big question, but a bunch of questions, but maybe you can help us with that.
Yeah, I'll try and summarize briefly. First off, no, that's not the main reason why insurance costs are going way up. It's because of like more extreme weather and natural disasters and climate change, and the fact that Florida's insurance regulators have kind of fallen down on the job on protecting consumers and trying to make insurance more affordable. About the legislature's measures to try and reduce costs, it's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future,
Right.
but we don't think they're going to be very helpful. There's been no sign this is actually going to lead to lower premiums. There's no sign of actual relief. We think it's really actually may make the situation worse because it will make it harder for consumers to get money from insurance companies if they're legitimately owed and if the insurance companies are exploiting them. And already in these lawsuits, in a lot of cases, you have the insurance company on one side, which has an enormous amount of resources and money and time and the ability to hire very good lawyers. And then you have the consumers who are nowhere near as like rich or well-heeled or anything along those lines. So we think it's more kind of them pointing fingers and trying to avoid like the real roots of the problem.
When you come into the state of Florida to insure, if you're a company, my understanding is that you have to insure the whole state. You can't select this community or that community or the the areas that are not flood prone. I mean, should there be changes that allow companies more freedom to do that, or you don't think? I mean, can you give me more specifics in your opinion?
And also, does the question also apply to auto insurance and where you can offer your auto insurance?
When I would have to look into this more to be absolutely sure, but I don't think that like giving insurance companies more freedom to say like we only want to insure this county as opposed to this more vulnerable county, I don't think that's going to be super helpful. And with regard to auto insurance, actually, climate change is actually causing auto insurance costs to go up as well, like homeowners insurance. Not as much, but one of the things we found out with that climate change is that it's causing, well, more extreme weather events, and that can lead to things like more storms, which affect obviously cars as well as homes. And this may not be as super relevant in Florida, but we found that also climate change is resulting in a lot more hailstorms. And hailstorms, as anyone can tell you, are utterly, utterly terrible for homes, for cars, for crops, for anything like insurance related. And so they're actually one of the drivers of cost as well.
You're also mentioning that climate change causes, so we're getting, they're talking about in Florida, probably the worst hurricane season. They're predicting it's going to be bad. But you were mentioning that the cost of fixing homes, the cost of repairing is up. I guess inflation, no, is affecting that as well. Is that another driver you were saying of the higher premiums?
It is a driver. The cost of like building materials and labor has gone up to a certain extent. Although now that inflation has receded mostly, although it's still there, we don't think it's quite as big a problem. Going back actually to what I said earlier, you asked about if it's the government's responsibility to try and fix the homeowner insurance crisis. We think so expressly, yes, because basically an insurance is kind of a strange product, because when it comes to auto insurance, you have to purchase it if you have a car. It's the law. And yet the government doesn't do a good job of trying to make auto insurance more affordable and accessible, even though it's required if you have a car. And with homeowners insurance, it's not quite required to the same extent, but every financial institution requires you to get homeowners insurance if you have a mortgage. So unless you are able to pay for a home with like a check or cash, which the vast majority of people can't do, you're required to have homeowners insurance. So we think that the government has a responsibility to try and make homeowners insurance affordable and accessible, or at least more affordable and accessible than it currently is for people who are responsible. Unfortunately, they're falling down on the job on both auto insurance and homeowners insurance.
All right. So if I'm a legislator sitting in the Tallahassee, and do I contact you? I mean, how? I mean, because you're giving me bits and pieces of things. Clearly, there's a crisis in our state. Clearly, auto insurance doesn't cover liability. There's zero liability, zero we only have a 10,000 a PIP with 1,000 deductible. That's it. But you have to have it, and they're charging us. I've been told double what most people in other states pay for like zero coverage almost. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of people we see that are victims of crashes and are severely hurt and have huge bills, and they don't have the money to pay that. But then they're required to spend all this money for this insurance that doesn't really exist. It's really a problem here, and we're trying to find out how is it that what can our political class do to bring the rates down and to give us good coverage? Is it just mandating BI and and letting it play out as it goes, or I mean, is there any research that says that the no fault? I know Minnesota's no fault, Florida's no fault. There are a few states that have that component of that PIP, personal injury protection, in their policies. Is that what drives the prices up, or do you have any understanding or research that can shed light on that?
It helps drive the prices up, but we actually don't think that's one of the main reasons for a rising auto insurance cost. One of the things is actually, are you familiar with the use of socioeconomic non-driving factors in auto insurance? Are you familiar?
All right, talk to me about it. Yes, talk to me about it.
Basically, auto insurance companies in Florida, they're allowed to use a lot of non-driving related factors to charge you more for auto insurance, and even if your driving record is perfect. And these include a lot of different things. They can include your zip code or the neighborhood where you live, which has some validity if it's like more dense or there's like more traffic accidents or other things like that. But they also include a whole bunch of factors, non-driving factors, that have little or no connection to like your driving record. Like auto insurance companies will often charge you more if you work at a lower paying job as opposed to a higher paying job, although that sounds kind of counterintuitive. Like if you're a cashier or a waiter, they'll charge you more compared to if you're say like a CEO or an investment banker. They'll also charge you more, for example, if you have a poor credit score. We actually did a report on this a few years ago, and we found that even if you're a good driver, if you have poor credit in Florida, you can be paying like 70%, 80%, 100%, sometimes even more than that, twice as much for auto insurance just because of your credit score.
No.
And all those factors, they disproportionately hurt people who are lower income, people who are living paycheck to paycheck. You can also get charged more for auto insurance based on your education level. Like the auto insurance companies will charge you more for auto insurance if you only graduated from high school as opposed to if you graduated from college and if you have a master's degree. You can also get charged more for auto insurance if you're single. The companies claim that married people are more responsible and more reliable, and we've seen little evidence of that. And one of the frustrating things is that when the companies say that all these non-driving factors are related to how risky someone is to insure, but when we, Consumer Federation of America, and other consumer advocates say we're skeptical of that, show us the data, they're like, well, that would damage competition, and so it's proprietary information, and so we can't show it to you. And since Florida is one of the states that has like no restrictions on any of these non-driving factors, so people can get hit with a lot of penalties. Someone, for example, can be paying more for auto insurance because they only graduated from high school. Then they're paying an additional penalty because of where they live. Then they're paying a third penalty because, say, they work as like a cashier. And finally, they can pay the biggest penalty of all because they have poor credit. And also, one more quick thing. Auto insurance companies say that credit is connected to how responsible someone is, and in some cases that may be true, but people can also have poor credit for a variety of reasons beyond their control, like
Student loan debt.
Yeah, student loan debt. Maybe they got unemployed because like the company went bankrupt and they got laid off through no fault of their own. Maybe they lost their job during the COVID-19 pandemic and had to scramble to find work and are still recovering from that. And we think that the use of all those factors is extremely unfair. It results in people paying hundreds or even thousands of dollars more for auto insurance, and that your auto insurance premium, it ought to be based on your driving record, not your credit score or whether you went to college or your job.
Michael, if you pay for your insurance premium in advance for the year, do you still have a penalty for your credit score?
Yes, from what I can remember, paying your auto insurance premium in advance for the year, that is actually a way to save money. A lot of companies offer a discount, which can vary in size. If you pay like your whole auto insurance premium either for 6 months or the year instead of like paying it monthly. So that's actually a tip to save money, and we encourage you to do that if you can. Of course, this also requires that you have the money in it to say like pay, I don't know, like the $600 for a 6-month premium.
But the base might have been affected by your credit score when they quote it to you.
Yes, that is true. So,
Okay.
and one of the other things we found frustrating is just the lack of information about insurance costs and auto insurance and homeowners insurance. And one of the things we've been urging regulators to do, including the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation, is to actually go out and do studies themselves, because they've got significantly more staff and expertise and resources than we do. And it's their job to try and make sure that insurance is affordable. But unfortunately, they've kind of adopted like a sort of laissez-faire, hands-off approach for the past couple of decades, saying, well, insurance is doing fine. Let's let the market sort itself out. And it's not our job to really help people. And we're trying to change that.
Amazing. I mean, this is shocking.
Now, you said you've been trying to get the data. Have you been trying to get it from the state of Florida?
We've been working on getting data from a bunch of different sources. We actually know a lot of the information about auto insurance and credit scores because we purchased data from this big data broker, Quadrant Information Services, a few years ago. And we're happy to share the report with you. We did a big, long report nationwide on credit scores and how people pay a lot more for auto insurance if they have fair credit and poor credit. But we're also urging like Florida and every state basically to do your own studies, collect your own data, and make that public. Show consumers like, here is what auto and homeowners insurance costs are like. Here is why they're going up so much. Here are ways that you can hopefully save money.
In Florida, are they using apps or anything else to track you in determining what they should charge you?
Yes, these are telematics. Very brief summary. Telematics is when you plug a device into your car or you download an app on your phone, and it tracks your driving behavior, like how much you drive, how fast you drive, hard braking, meaning whether you slam on the brakes a lot, cornering, which means like how sharply you go around corners. And then it transmits that data back to the auto insurance company, which calculates your premium based on that data. And theoretically, this sounds like it could be somewhat helpful to consumers because they're accurately measuring your behavior. They're trying to more accurately match insurance rates to how risky a driver you are. But in practice, there are a huge amount of problems. For example, there are no limits in most states or no consumer protections on what data those devices or apps can collect. There are few or no limits on what they can do with that data. Like, are they just using it for insurance, or are they trying to to use it in some way, I don't know, to sell you like annoying ads or to sell it to another company that can then try to monetize it. And we actually gave a presentation on telematics and how there need to be stronger consumer protections at a conference of state insurance regulators a few months ago. And we've met with about 35 states so far saying, hey, these programs are here. They're not going to go away. They could benefit consumers, but consumers need to be protected and their data needs to be protected. And we've gotten some good responses, some responses that are a bit more indifferent, and we're going to keep pushing for this.
So what forms or ways can they collect your data? I mean, is from the car itself, from apps that you have on your phone? I mean, what is it that you see out there, or what we can do as a consumer to limit our privacy being, used by insurance companies?
They can collect your data in a whole bunch of ways. You mentioned apps. They usually say download an app on your phone. Like that's what Allstate does with their telematics program, DriveWise. They can plug a device into your car. I believe we'll need to go back and look. But Progressive, with its program Snapshot, they were the first company to really develop these telematics programs and is tracking consumers' data. And so I think Snapshot is both an app and a device, depending on what you do. You can refuse to participate in these programs, and we actually recommend that consumers not participate in them unless there are like some really strong protections for your data, which again, most states do not have. Florida definitely does not have them. But one of the things that you've actually pointed out, and this is a problem, is that sometimes the companies or other companies, whether insurance companies or auto manufacturers, may be collecting data on your driving habits without your consent or even without your knowledge. And there was a New York Times article, which you actually mentioned a few weeks ago,
Right.
which found that, among other things, General Motors was collecting all this data on consumers' driving habits without their knowledge and without their consent, and giving it to the insurance industry and other companies to try and make money off of it. And after this report came out, there was a big outcry, and General Motors then said, we're not going to do this anymore. But we're kind of skeptical. We think that first, General Motors needs to face punishment for doing this, like real consequences, like a big fine or other legal consequences. And second, there need to be safeguards to make sure that consumers' data doesn't get collected, and their privacy doesn't get violated unless they agree to it.
Henry?
CJ, you deal with so many drivers and people with insurance issues in your profession, but one thing the newer cars have is a dash cam.
Right.
And so my question would be, what's your experience, CJ, with how has dash cams changed how you interact with your clients? But also, is there any movement to put cameras inside the cabin facing the driver?
Well, I think there's one thing about, putting a GoPro or putting a camera to protect yourself if there's a crash. I can't tell you how many times it's a he said, she said, I had the green light. No, he had the green light. Who had the green light? And nobody gets compensation. And, I had a friend he's 100% honest. He definitely swore up and down he had the green light. The other guy lied. Too bad. So having some kind of evidence, if it's crash related, you're the victim, that's a good thing. But if it's going to be used by an insurance company to jack up rates, because again, some of the most dangerous drivers are probably some of the slowest drivers I've ever seen. They cause crashes, and they're probably going to score high on the data thing because they're not braking a certain way, they're not going a certain speed, but they cause crashes. So I also know guys that are semi-pro in handling cars and motorcycles and so forth, and know how to drive, and they're safer than one of these people I'm talking about. So the data is that's scary. I mean, for me. So I don't mind personally if we have the evidence to help our client. That's a good thing. The cameras on the street, But to be used to determine the rates of what they should be paying, or to not even know about it. At the very least, you should be aware that your insurance company is tracking this information, and it's going to make a difference on your rates. I mean, I didn't know half of what Michael's talking about. I mean, it's shocking. I mean, it's sort of funny. We had the big abortion issue in the United States, and people miss, in my opinion, the whole argument. It's not whether you want abortion or not. It's called the right of privacy. Government now, and now they're talking about rolling it back to when we had Griswold was the case before Roe v. Wade. that contraceptives were illegal. And the Congress just voted, Republican voted against, contraceptives. And it's like, hold it, stop. The issue here is a right of privacy. Me as a consumer, me as a person, I should not have government, and worse yet, corporations now involved. One thing, it was always before about legal things but now it's about, they track everything we do. And is that okay? And they're going to track it for the wrong reason. And that's where I think I have a problem with it. What do you think, Michael? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, we think that basically, first off, if you consumers know, corporations shouldn't be getting people's driving data without consumers' informed consent, and that means the consumers need to meaningfully know what the corporations are collecting, and they need to meaningfully understand what the effects are going to be. Like,
Michael,
say,
you know what I'm going to tell you right now? I tell you, I gave talks about insurance. I don't sell insurance. I'm a lawyer. And I was just, for example, in Minneapolis with this groups of people, and we'll ask them, what kind of coverage? They have no idea.
mhm,
They'll say, I have full coverage. Let's say in
yeah,
Florida, I have full coverage. And they think they have great insurance. Their car is covered because they have a loan on it. But
mhm,
that's it. They didn't even have liability insurance. They don't have UM. Insurance companies are even lying to them. Or even worse yet, they allow you to go on the app and pick the coverages so they're even less liable.
mhm,
You pick
yeah.
this without anything. It just seems like you can say they need to know, but I don't know.
How are you
Yeah,
going to
most
educate
people
them?
no, most people don't think about insurance, unfortunately, until they need it. And so when we say like informed consent, we mean like there needs to be like very obvious, like say opt in, like a consumer needs to affirmatively say like, I expressly have read this, and I give the company permission to do the data, and like need to affirmatively do something. It can't be like, I don't know, page 21 of like an impenetrable legal contract where you need like a lawyer to explain it to you.
Well, with uninsured motorists in Florida, by law, the insurance company has to offer you, UM, and then you're supposed to sign. So
Mhm.
if you have some amount of liability insurance and they don't show you that signed document rejecting it, and I've never once had one person, I'm talking thousands of people, had remember about signing that. But what they will show me a signed document, but their agent goes sign here, sign here, sign here, sign here, and they just sign these, and they're never
Yeah.
educated about what they're turning down. And then now
Mm.
worse with the app, which I try to talk to a human being. They don't know, go to the app. My gosh, how are you going to pick the right coverage? Know what you're doing. It's all built for the insurance company to make, and I have a feeling they make great money. I don't know. Do
Yeah,
you have
they
any
make
facts
quite a
on that?
lot. We think that consumer education is important, but we think that also too often it gets used as like a substitute for like meaningful consumer protections. Like they're saying, oh, just let the consumers educate it. And then they actually don't do any actual consumer education, and they like push back against like, say, efforts to try and hold insurance companies accountable.
Well, if I go to an insurance salesman and I'm looking for help and counsel, and I've seen this, they'll say, "Well, you don't need UM." Well, yes, you do, because you're going to be a victim twice. In Florida, 70% of the people don't have proper BI, don't even have BI, and you don't have UM. You're really going to be messed with. So, if there's not even promoting it, but there's no responsibility for promoting it, even though it's a law to promote it, they should. It's like in Europe, when a corporation breaks a law, you can go to jail. In the United
Mhm.
States, it's a fine. The company is criminally charged. Well, big deal. I mean, it does hurt the company because they're money driven. But if the CEO is going to be held accountable criminally, I bet you this stuff is going to stop. But
Yeah.
we don't have that accountability here. So if the law says you have to offer UM, they don't, and they're not even civilly liable. I mean, you think that's something that could be that your group would think would be necessary to see this kind of change?
We'd have to review it to the specifics, but generally, yeah, Consumer Federation of America, we're strongly in favor of greater accountability, especially greater legal accountability for corporations. We think that too often corporations get away with wrongdoing, and it's like a slap on the wrist at best. And so we think the penalties ought to be a lot more meaningful. And following up on that, just something really quick. The insurance company is not your friend. They have all these sorts of things like celebrity endorsements or catchy jingles, or, the Geico, a Gecko, and other things. Those are marketing attempts to try and get you to buy their product, and you should not feel obligated to like stay with them out of some misplaced source of loyalty, because their chief objective is to make money off of you.
Now, I want to know this because I feel that I'm correct in this, but when I've had an insurance company I keep paying, I automatically renew. And then for some reason I have to go to another company. They sell it to me a lot cheaper. It feels like that if you're loyal and good, and I know if you have UM and you've been loyal, and they're going to fight paying you. I've seen that every day. But They just take advantage of that, and then
Yep.
you're probably better off getting a new policy every year or so, so that you get a better rate. You have any opinion or research on that?
Yes, you are actually in a lot of cases genuinely better. What you're talking about is when corporations charge you more just based because you've stayed with them longer. That's a thing called price optimization. When the company tries to like hike people's rates because they look at someone and try and like collect information about you and decide this person has been with us for a while. We think that we can raise their premium and they will still stay with us because they'll think, oh, it's such a bother to like go and try and get like a new policy and go through the whole hassle. And in some states, that sort of thing, raising people's prices just because you think you can get away with it, and that's illegal. But I don't think it's illegal in Florida, unfortunately. But going back to what you said, it is well worth your time to take like a couple hours and try and shop around like every year, look at various insurance options, whether it's auto insurance or homeowners insurance, and see if you can get a better deal. Like, for example, with auto insurance, if you find a company that's like charging you, I don't know, $150 per month for auto insurance, and then you find another company that offers a better deal of $120, you're saving $30 per month, which winds up to $360 per year. That's not too bad depending on like the time you've put in. And with homeowners insurance and stuff, ideally sometimes you may be able to find better deals. Although with Florida's insurance market in such a mess, I realize like finding just any basic coverage may be like one of a challenge sometimes.
So outside of being a good consumer, educating yourself, understanding what you need and don't need, politically, it's the political class responsibility to get this in order.
Yeah.
And you think, do you know any data that states that, I think Texas would be a state like Florida, I don't know, but I would think they are because they're more Wild West, so less hands-on with the insurance companies, or they would be having similar problems that Florida does. Do you know if that's the case or not? I'm just curious. Or are the states that are more into micromanaging insurance, the consumers do better?
A lot of states are actually now having similar problems to like Florida and insurance. Texas is seeing insurance costs go up, homeowners insurance, they're getting hit with more storms and hurricanes. Louisiana is seeing major problems as well. In parts of southern Louisiana, insurance has become almost unaffordable. And it's just a really big problem. Specifically, what consumers can do, we have tips that you can save you money, but on a political level, you can call your state legislator and complain about this and say, I want insurance to be fair. I want you to make insurance rates more affordable. I want you to ban the use of non-driving factors in auto insurance and promote like grant programs to help consumers like harden their homes against insurance risk, because insurance is regulated at the state level. So that means while it's kind of annoying to get things to work on a national level, it does mean you can more easily reach the people who are responsible for making insurance affordable. So call your state legislator, call your state representative, and urge them about this. Most people are not familiar with insurance and don't know about all these problems. So this may be like a revelation.
Let's tack to the what we're talking about, homeowners, and you're saying, call and get them involved. But if we push too hard, what's happened in Florida, at least, some insurers are just left the state. Are we going to lose the insurance capability? And I also know that what the political folks have done and created a state form of insurance for homeowners.
Citizens, yeah.
Right, citizens. And that's scary because there's a feeling if we have a big hurricane and they have to pay out, they don't have the money. I mean, you want to talk to me about that? Any ideas?
When it comes to Citizens, that's basically the state-backed insurance company of last resort. And we think that that's kind of a necessity at this point because it's often the only insurance option in certain areas. But we also think that there's a requirement, I think, that Citizens insurance policies be more expensive than like the policies that you can find in private insurance. So we think that's a bad requirement. It should be gotten rid of. At this point, a lot of people are going to need insurance, and it needs to be like remotely affordable, whether it comes from a private insurance company or Citizens or somewhere else. When it comes to your thoughts about like insurance companies leaving the state, that is a problem that we've actually run into, not just in Florida, but in California and Louisiana, and even other states now like Iowa, because they're getting increasingly affected by climate change and natural disasters. And some insurance companies are cutting back on coverage or reducing their like policies in certain areas. I think what I would say is that you're already seeing a lot of insurance companies leave the state, and in order to solve this crisis, Florida is going to need all the consumer protection and effort it can get. So you'll need both measures to like reduce the use of non-driving factors in auto insurance, to ban the use of credit scores in auto insurance and homeowners insurance. You'll need a really big mitigation program to try and help individual consumers and communities like undertake measures to reduce risk. Like everyone in, say, like I believe in like Florida should be like taking measures to strengthen their roof against winds from hurricanes, to like reduce flood risk, to do other things. And the Florida state government should be helping provide grants for that on a massive scale, because
when you talk about grants, I mean, it's easy to say grants, but that has to come from somewhere. I mean,
yeah,
is
it
that it's a
does.
gift to the consumer to improve their home, or is that
Yes,
something a loan back
it
or
would be
something?
based. We're thinking something similar to what Alabama has, which is strengthen Alabama homes. They give you up to $10,000, and it's a grant to like strengthen your home and like reinforce your roof up to certain standards. And Florida recently has a similar program, My Safe Florida Home, which is good, and it's a good program, but it needs to be greatly expanded. And honestly, the legislature only recently adopted it, and this should have been done like a decade ago. Now, as you say, the problem is that that money does need to come from somewhere. So it is going to mean like more government spending and other things. But we also think that this is a big problem. And while it may be somewhat fairly expensive to like undertake these grants and have these programs, it will be a lot more expensive not to.
Have you looked at the political class taking money from insurance companies and looking the other way, or have you stayed out of that realm? I mean, because it seems like these guys they know better. I mean, come on, they know better. DeSantis knows better. The guys in Tallahassee know better. Why aren't they working on it? Are they? I've been told they've taken a lot of money, for his run for presidency, and here we are.
Yeah, we've looked at that to a certain extent, and we're trying to do more. The insurance industry is very powerful. They're well organized. They earn an enormous amount of money. Their CEOs make tens of millions of dollars per year. They have a lot of influence. A lot of the people who serve on insurance committees in the state legislators are former insurance agents or insurance executives. And they have like, there's also the problem of the revolving door, where a lot of people who work in insurance regulation either come from the insurance industry, or a lot of insurance regulators actually go to work in the insurance industry after they leave. Former Florida Insurance Commissioner David Altmaier, he's actually the guy who was, I think, at least partly responsible for the tort reforms and the restrictions on lawsuits. He abruptly resigned and is now working as a lobbyist, and most of his clients seem to be insurance companies. In fact,
I call
his
that corruption. We do the
so
crime first, and then we get paid behind versus getting the
well,
money up
it
front.
might. I don't want to like disparage him, but there's at the very least there's like
Well,
some
it's
pretty
nothing
serious
against them, but
conflicts of
that's what they
there's
do.
some pretty serious conflicts of interest, and at the very least, it's just that like protecting consumers was not really his highest priority. So we think there should be restrictions on that, but we also think that there was actually an article written years ago about how state insurance regulators often get together at conferences, and how the insurance industry sort of courts them with like various dinners and expertise, which often expertise is not all it's cracked up to be, but they offer advice and they offer all this help. And they say, you don't want to like get into a fight with us because it will just make your life miserable and you won't accomplish anything. And I think part of the reason why insurance regulators and legislators have not really helped consumers up to now is because, well, one, the situation didn't used to be so bad. There were problems with insurance and people affording insurance, but it didn't used to be as big a problem as it is now. And second, this is kind of relatively new and unexpected. Climate change has been happening for a little while, but in the last few years, the amount of natural disasters and billion-dollar disasters, hurricanes, wildfires, storms, tornadoes has gotten a lot worse. I live in Maryland, and we actually are now getting tornadoes semi-frequently, which is not a thing that should ever be happening in Maryland. And so I think a lot of the legislators are not unsure what to do. They're afraid of taking on a powerful insurance lobby. And when it comes to Governor Ron DeSantis, I do not know what his thing is, but I got the impression that he doesn't really care about insurance. He gets a lot of donations from the insurance industry, and he just wants the whole thing to go away. Unfortunately, that means he's probably not going to be really helpful in like working towards like big solutions, meaningful solutions.
Okay, so I guess we're here in Florida, we're in trouble. It's the only way of putting it. I mean, I
You're
just
not
don't know.
necessarily in trouble, but it will require like strong and direct action by like both the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation, the Florida legislature, and the governor to like try and reduce costs and do all these measures to reduce risk, and also maybe look at land use. Perhaps like It doesn't make sense to keep rebuilding the home if it's been destroyed like 6 times on the island, even if it does
Yeah.
have like very nice beachfront property and a wonderful view.
Yeah, it seems like I was watching a program of the Dutch that reclaim land, and they kept saying with the United States, instead of when you have a problem and you're getting this flooding and issues, you got to stop building there and build elsewhere, and you know,
Or at the very least, build on like stilts, raise your home up or something like that.
And we're not very good at doing that. We just rebuild the same thing in the same place and wonder why. What's that the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. I guess we're very good at that part. But the last question, because we're running out of time, unfortunately. You're amazing, Michael. You're just I need to talk more about you and find you, read your book. I think you have a lot.
I do not have a book, but there are like some good books about, well, I don't know. There are some interesting books about insurance, or at least articles and stuff that I can send along.
Please do that.
Is there resources on the website for Consumer Federation of America?
We do, yeah. We have a bunch of tips for people to save money on auto insurance. We have a presentation that we did on telematics, a PowerPoint presentation, which I think lays out the issue really well, which I'll send to you. We also did a report recently on consumers who lack homeowners insurance, which is a pretty serious problem, because if you don't have homeowners insurance, you're essentially on the hook if your house gets damaged or destroyed, and a lot of people can't afford that. And we found actually in Miami about I think 15% of the homeowners there don't have insurance, so they're basically taking a colossal gamble.
And we'll be putting those down in the description underneath by the time people actually are watching this.
Do you think that, I know we're running out of time, but do you think that government-owned insurance company might be the future? I mean, is that going to be the way we're going to have to handle this if companies don't get more reasonable?
It's difficult. If companies don't get more reasonable, well, first off, I hope that doesn't happen and that there are lots of insurance options that are affordable and accessible for everyone. But I guess I would say if push comes to shove, government-backed insurance is a lot better than no insurance. And if it sounds to me like if that's the option, then yeah, maybe we should have like some sort of.
But we will call it something else.
Not government insurance.
You can call it something.
Here in Florida, I don't know if it's gone into effect yet, but we were toying with government reinsurance. So you still have the private insurance companies. We just have a fund that we use tax dollars to reinsure for the
and that's a whole nother thing. Reinsurance,
socialism for insurance companies, right?
That's basically the insurance for the insurance companies, and that's a whole other topic. It's mostly unregulated, and it doesn't have any oversight at all, even less than like the insurance.
Sounds perfect for Florida.
It's perfect for Florida. Michael, you are amazing. I'm Mr. DeLong. You are a wealth of information, and I thank you for not only being with us, but actually being in the fight. This is super important, and you know, Florida is the cutting edge of why we need somebody like you. You should move here, and I probably couldn't afford the insurance.
Yeah, well, I actually do have family members who live in Florida, in Miami and Orlando and a couple of other places, and I visited them, and they like it as well. I remember I was kind of like astonished. I guess I can't really talk because I live in Maryland, but I was also astonished by several things, both the great beaches when we visited, but also like the incredible humidity. So yeah.
You get used to it though. Michael, if you're down here, we'd love to show you around and pick your brain. You're amazing person.
And Michael, we'll be boosting this beyond normal just to get people to see this. So please contact us if you have other issues relative to our audience that you want to get out there.
Please do that. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, we have other folks I've talked about who would be happy to talk about many other things like food safety, finances, housing. And when this is stuff, if you could send it to us as we can share it, I would appreciate it. And I'll send along the documents and more insurance resources and tips on saving money that I mentioned.
We want to really push this subject statewide in the next year or two. It's our goal because it's a crisis, and you can't believe, in my profession anyway, how many people I see that are victims twice because they didn't have the adequate insurance, they didn't have the right insurance, or they've been victimized by somebody who didn't have liability insurance or what have you. So what you're doing is very important.
Thanks. One final thing, actually, very quickly. Sorry, this could be another whole other topic. In flood insurance, you do not have the standard homeowner insurance policy does not include flood insurance. No. So sadly, lots of people only figure this out after like this happened, and they think I have insurance, so I'm protected against flood damage. Sadly, no, you're not. You got to buy a different policy.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that is very important. The ignorance of a lot of our folks, it's big. You need flood insurance as well as the regular insurance that you have, right? Yeah. Thank you very much, Michael. We really appreciate it. We'll come back. Maybe we can have you back again, and we can be better prepared for you, because there's so much to
Mhm.
to think about. And thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, I'd like that. Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael.